Howdy, I'm Susan with Two Chicks with Hiking Sticks, where we explore the cultural, the historical, and the natural world around us.
I'm Monica.
And what do you do, Monica?
I look pretty.
I'm so pretty and witty and gay.
I don't know about that. I like to sit here and be the audience most of the time.
So she's my person I can bounce off of, otherwise you just hear my moaning voices just going on and on. But not today.
But if I get to hear it, y'all have to hear it.
Because we're in it together.
That's right.
Right? All right. Well, today is an interesting show because we're covering something that we have not covered heretofore. And it is a actual National Historic Trail. And so you remember how we've talked about the NPS, and the NPS has 433 different types of units in it. Well, I think there's 20 different types of units, but 433 units in those. None of those are National Historic Trails. They have scenic trails, but not the National Historic Trails. The National Historic Trails are covered by the National Forest.
See, this is interesting to me.
Why is that interesting? I know. Why do they make the distinction?
Yeah. I mean, it's all national park stuff, right?
Well, but my guess is that... No, I don't know. I was going to say, because a scenic trail versus a historic trail, I mean, historic I get, because it means there's something culturally significant
right.
that shows an evolution of something that happened through there, right? But I don't know why it's under the Forest Service.
Yeah.
But anyhow, we're going to cover a National Historic Trail, and the National Historic Trail is the El Camino Real de los Tejas.
The Camino Real of Texas.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. Now, while it says that it's named as Tejas, meaning Texas, right? It actually crosses, well, actually, if you go way back at the beginning, it actually starts down in Mexico City, comes up across through Texas into Louisiana.
Wasn't it also known like as the San Antonio Trail or the San Antonio Road or something like that?
Yeah, the San Antonio Road. It's part of the San Antonio Road. You'll also hear it referred to as the King's Road.
The Royal Road.
Or the Royal Road.
Yeah, okay. I've
Either
heard that.
one,
Yeah.
it refers to, like, when Spain was over the trail, it refers to the king at that time. They named it then the King's Trail.
Yeah, of course they did.
Of course they did, because that's what they had to do to make it their own.
Yes.
Yeah, so.
And they wipe out all the indigenous people along the way. Sorry. I'm not salty about that in 2025.
But you know, I do believe that's kind of a theme in everything we seem to talk about, is that the poor indigenous folks, I mean, they didn't stand a chance. Once the Europeans had a scent on, whatever the land was.
And what they wanted.
They were going to get it no matter what.
Yep.
So, yeah. So when you think about the National Historic Trail system, there's like 25 states that have different versions of different historical trails. There are National Historic Trails that cover like 25,000 miles. But some of what's interesting about them is that some of them could be like in state parks and national parks and historic sites. I mean, they can cross over in different places. So like, for instance, in the El Camino Real de los Tejas, the one that we're talking about today, it's not like the Appalachian or like the PCT where there's a beginning and an end and it's one through hike.
Right.
It doesn't exist that way.
Right.
And partly because there were so many different versions of the trail, and it goes through like cities, like literal cities. Like, part of the trail goes through San Antonio.
Right.
Like there's a road in San Antonio that it would have been the Camino Real.
Right. And I guess that's because, I guess historically, like you said, the versions or the variations, nobody followed one particular path.
Right.
They were just all going generally from point A to point B, and this seemed to be the least path of resistance, or the path of least resistance.
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, you can kind of look at it that way because, like, coming up through San Antonio, I mean, you come from, southwest Texas up through San Antonio. Goliad sits kind of to the southeast of San Antonio. It kind of went up through Goliad too, kind of connects again, and then goes out East Texas over into Louisiana. What I find interesting is that, this is like back in the 1600s that, of course, the Spaniards were trying to make their way and everything into Texas and what have you. And Texas wasn't Texas at the time. It wasn't even a republic at the time. It was just more land. But the, quote, capital of Tejas at that time was actually sitting in what is present-day Louisiana. And it was interesting because the French obviously were in Louisiana
Right,
too, right?
right.
So the French are coming in, setting up their little spot of land, saying, "I am king of this forest," and the Spaniards are like, "Oh no, you don't." And so they then too had their little place that they built in Natchitoches, I think it was, because they're like, well, we need to stop their flow of those French coming this way. And so then you have this kind of thing happening, right? But all the while, the whole purpose of this road was because of the Caddo
Yes.
Indians,
Yes.
right? Those folks were the ones that made this road the road that it is.
Right.
And again, fascinating, these folks that came long before all these people decided they wanted the land. But the reason why this road was so significant is that it was the perfect spot between Florida and California, or even down into Mexico. Again, those states weren't necessarily states at the time, but
Right.
think about it logistically, like, where those states are. It was a perfect in-between points where the Caddo could sell their goods. They sold corn out the wazoo, because they could make corn. It was very fertile land there in East Texas.
Right. That's interesting. And we've discussed the Caddo before. We talked about them when we had the Big Thicket episode.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked them a little bit about Caddo State Park, Caddo Lake State Park, which is up kind of in the north eastern part of Texas.
Mm-hmm.
And doesn't this Camino Real de Tejas, doesn't it run near some Caddo mounds?
Oh, yeah, it does.
Right?
So
It goes through Bastrop too, right?
Yeah.
Modern day Bastrop. Yeah.
You are so spot on. Look at Monica go. Well, okay, so the Caddo had been around for a long time. I mean, like, since, I don't know, at least like the 1300s, right? So they've had established this type of pathway, roadway-ish, right, where they would, like, sell their wares and stuff like that. But the Caddo Mounds, which is a state park, which is in the east part of Texas, is truly where they had lived, right? And they used to really thrive in this area. There used to be a big population in the area. Unfortunately, where they had been maybe at 200,000, they quickly dropped down to like 10,000 because of, disease and everything that the Europeans were bringing in. But this trade route was so important and vital that everybody else started understanding it was too, and so everybody else wanted to hop on the bandwagon.
That's interesting. And so I'm guessing because the Caddo also, it makes sense that they were flourishing in these areas. I mean, you had the Big Thicket, which had,
Yep.
it was like a grocery store, literally a grocery store for them. All their meat, all the vegetation, all the water, everything was like right there.
But it was interesting that the Caddo weren't so much about like selling their wares of, like, say, meat because they could hunt them.
Right.
It was more about like their bows and arrows that they could then send out to, like, to say New Mexico, where they really needed to have them, right?
Right.
So it was things that they made, and of course the corn. But what really hurt them, aside from the Spaniards that came in, what really hurt them was when it was not good weather or a disease was coming. It's like if they didn't have stuff to sell and they didn't have things to trade, like, they couldn't really survive. And so as Spain started to set up their way in Texas and all, it started, as it normally does with the indigenous folks, it starts pushing them in different places and stuff, and eventually pushed them into present-day Oklahoma.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Which is
I know. It makes sense. I don't like it, but it still
Yeah.
makes sense.
so. This trail, it would be interesting. I wish, and I don't think I've read anything at all about this, but it would be cool if they had a through trail.
I know.
The way the Pacific Crest and Appalachian Trail, there is a trail that goes through the Sam Houston.
Oh, through the forest?
I think so. I think I remember reading about one. Maybe if y'all know, maybe drop it down in the comments. I want to say that I remember reading that there was a through trail going through Texas, but I think it would be really interesting to have one follow the Camino Real.
Because there are segments of this Camino Real that are absolutely through hikes, and there's one in Floresville, I know, in Texas, that actually is the actual spot. And they talk about these, I don't know what they're called, I would say they're U's, where it's the ruts that the wagons made on these trails that just wore into the ground. But yeah, back to your point about going through Bastrop and all. Yeah, so and that's why they call Highway 21 in Texas the King's Highway, because that's kind of what that was, right? Because it was part of the King's Highway that went out to East Texas.
And didn't coming from the south, I know it's didn't it cover the Medina Valley area too?
Yeah. I mean, it kind of came because it came from the west, so yeah. I think the more significant thing is that it came up through our missions.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
It comes up through the missions, and we've talked about a little bit about that within the mission video that we did sometime back. We'll put a link in here, but
That was our first video.
oh, that was our first video. Yeah, that's right. But yeah, we talked about that too. Is that this was a prime place, and partly because there was water along the way.
Yes.
Right. So we all know that our missions are connected mostly by water. I mean, essentially we've got water that kind of goes through there with the San Antonio River.
That's interesting. Well, and that makes sense too, because I'm thinking of the Medina Valley natural area, which the Medina River is down there. And I want to say that I looked at a map, and it was right. It's on the Poteet Highway, Highway 16.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that whole area is down there. So it's not a through thing, but there's some hiking in areas that would kind of lend itself to maybe learning a little bit more firsthand about that journey.
Well, in that, just understanding that a lot of that journey, I mean, again, it begins down in Mexico City and then comes up through the southwestern parts of Texas, again, multiple entry points. So people were crossing the Rio Grande to do this communication, this trade, all of this stuff, right? And then coming up through what we see as San Antonio, Austin, and then going out east. So, but it was interesting how Louisiana and Texas are a part of this trail. And it's a pretty long trail. I want to say it's like just over 2,500 miles of trail.
Yeah. When I looked it up, I read a little bit about it going into Mexico, but the primary stuff that I saw was from Texas up through Louisiana.
I had to look into that because I'm like, how come everything I'm reading just shows it like starting in Texas?
Yeah.
Well, it's because we're biased in whatever was written out there. But the actual truth is, I know, say it isn't so. The actual truth is that it began in Mexico City.
Okay, that makes perfect sense.
But because this is another fascinating fact, is that Mexico City was once a part of like kind of what we would think of as the Texas territory.
Yes, of course.
Yeah. So when you think about
that's true. Yes.
The Spaniards owned or claimed a lot of land in Texas and in Mexico. And Mexico is like, oh, take it, don't, whatever, just get out of our face, right? We tried to reach a good compromise with, we'll do a dividing line at the Rio Grande. How about that? But yeah,
they should have just taken those Spaniards and eaten their hearts and be done with it.
Well, and then there's that. So speaking of that, so the Spaniards, of course, as they are wont to do, were building missions along the way. And in another episode where we talk about the Acoma Pueblo, of course, the Spaniards had built a mission, Esteban, or San Esteban, right?
Esteban, yeah.
Church out in New Mexico. And that was built, I want to say it was like in 1659 or something like that. For some reason that date sticks in my head. The one in Texas comes later. So it was interesting because you wonder, how did the Spaniards do this? Did they come up and go, okay, I'm going left to New Mexico and we're going to go right to East Texas? Again, these weren't those states at the time.
What was it Bugs Bunny used to say? Remember when he's like in the tunnel and he pops up and he's like, oh, I should have taken a left in Albuquerque or whatever? Do you remember that? He does. He says something. My brother needs to back me up on this. I'm almost positive that he pops up and he's like, oh, I should have taken a left in Albuquerque.
Albuquerque.
I'm that old.
Who doesn't love a good Bugs Bunny? Come on. But I thought it was interesting, that the missions in Texas, of course in the East Texas, was like in 1690. So it was so far after the one that was done in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. But then, of course, you can see this string of missions across Texas that kind of go across the belt of Texas into New Mexico.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting history. Of course, the forced Catholicism and all of that they were doing. So that's real fun.
I can't help but think, mostly because I was thinking about our Fort Davis trip, and that was later, right? When the San Antonio to El Paso.
Oh, the San Antonio El Paso road?
Yeah, that was later because that was more active. Like in the 1800s, right?
Yeah, it was 1800s.
Because I suck at history, so I'm horrible with dates.
But yeah, it was around the 1800s.
But I can just see like people trying to go up this trail and we should go take a left in San Antonio.
But that's a really good point. That's a really good point. Like, what was the timeline of all of that? That would
Because
be a
that was
really
the
nice
gold
visual.
rush. That was
Yeah.
they were headed, to California for the gold rush.
Yeah.
But that was around the time of the Civil War.
Well, it was around. So that's 1861. The Civil
Right.
War started in 1861.
See, I was right. Mid 1800s. Wow, good for me. I'm learning something. Damn.
Come heck or high water, as they say.
But I see that trail going this way, and I'm like, how many of them actually veered this way to go to California? Towards El Paso.
Well, because they would have had to bend to come further south to go into Mexico. If you were on the El Camino Real, right?
Mm-hmm.
You would have had to just go left if you were just keep going west if you were going to California.
And I guess you would go through San Antonio because that was a major hub.
Mm-hmm. Which you think about San Antonio today, it is a major hub. You've got Interstate 10 that goes this way, Interstate 35 goes this way.
Mm-hmm.
You go coast to coast, top to bottom.
Yeah.
So it's, yeah.
Well, it's probably the same, the same paths roughly.
Well, they talk about how the El Camino Real de los Tejas actually is a part of what I-35 sits on today.
Yeah, that
Because
makes
it goes
sense.
up to Austin and then goes through kind of like the Onion Creek Parkway, McKinney Falls, out that way to
Yes.
East Texas.
Yeah. Oh, that's all really interesting because you don't think about all these roads you've been on. That's like, I live close to Austin Highway,
Uh-huh.
and I never considered that Austin Highway was the actual highway to Austin. But at one time, before 35,
Oh my gosh, is it really?
am I just blowing your mind? Yes, that was the way people went to Austin. Eventually, they veered off and went north, but that's what my mom always said. I don't know. But my mom was a cartographer, so I imagine
I would
if
trust
anybody
her.
was going to know, it would have been her.
Because how many people do you know that are cartographers?
Yeah, both my parents were cartographers, so if they said that this was the old highway and that's why it was called Austin Highway.
I had no idea.
It was. My mom said it was like the Strip, like everybody hung out on that highway.
I do believe that because I remember growing up that was a popular street.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway,
But-
I'm digressing as usual.
But it's that. But part of that I really think of as being that history and culture that was fed through this whole Camino Real all the way through into Louisiana. That some of these cities that it goes through, like Goliad, or why do you think they became cities? These were stopping points for people along this trail.
It makes
San
sense.
Antonio,
Yeah.
and Floresville, or what have you, because they were good spots to be in. But unfortunately, as we talked about, as the Caddo Indians were eventually kind of moved out of place, they lost any land, and Texas was like, "We're not giving you anything, so good luck," and then kind of pushed them back up into.
Even though you were here before us, we're not going to give you anything.
I know. Kills me every time. Kills me
But-
every time we read this.
It makes sense too. I've always just known Camino Real as a subdivision, or there's a street Camino Real. I didn't really know a whole lot of history about it, but it makes sense now because I think Real is the Spanish word for royal,
Oh,
which
really?
was where royal. Yeah.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Look at me blowing your mind how many times in the last 20 minutes.
I don't know how to contain myself. But it's really it is cool. I mean, when you go back and you start studying that kind of history about where did these names come from?
Yeah.
Or why do we call something, it's Highway 21, but it's also known as the King's Highway? Well, why? And, growing up in this area, it's like I never thought twice about it.
Sure.
But now wanting to understand it more because it's that cultural history that we really need to appreciate and understand why we are what we are.
I guess,
right?
yeah.
Well, I really find it fascinating, so there's that.
I find it really interesting when I actually stop and break down a word. Like for years, there's a little town that's actually probably as close to San Antonio now as it never was, but it is now. It was a little town of Helotes.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, you know what the word Helotes is in Spanish, right?
Elote.
Elote, corn.
Was that what it was for?
Corn. I don't know if that was an area where a lot of corn was grown. I don't know, but why would you name a town Corn? Why? Elote. Why? I'm just saying.
I never thought about it, but But that is part of the cultural heritage of Texas, right?
Yes.
I mean, you had so many influences that came through Texas on their way out west or what have you. And Texas did have Six Flags over it at some point, right? So
Yes.
we're down to one. But it's just, it's, you know, the history, and this is why we do these podcasts. We do these podcasts to share this information with you, just to give you a taste of stuff for you to then pick it up and decide, what else do I want to dig into?
Yeah, because then while you're hiking, you're like, oh, I'm in this area. Like, for example, you've never been, but my wife and I used to go to the Medina River Natural Area quite a bit. And the trails there are pretty easy. I'll put a link in the blog. They're not hard. But it's some pretty, expansive little trail system. Mm-hmm. And I would have never known that was part of the Camino Real.
Yeah.
If we hadn't done this podcast. So, you do some of these hikes in some of these places and you find out that there's just a lot more history and a lot more background into that area, and that probably those areas themselves, the natural areas, haven't really changed that much since the time that they were discovered.
Probably not. And I've seen the El Camino Real signs, because you can see them along roadways that the trail follows. I've seen the signs, but I never paid much mind to them. But now, especially since I started my journey 4 years ago to really understand more of our MPS and our parks and our world out there, the more that I understand it, the more I can appreciate it and then share that with others. And that's my goal.
Yes, it is. And I'm here to...
You're learning too?
I don't know about learning, but I'm sure here to back you up to get your goal out there. Doggone it.
Doggone it.
Come hell or high water. We're putting that message out to y'all.
That's right. And we hope that you still find it interesting. Even if you don't go look more stuff up, please find it interesting, because we really want you to subscribe to us. We want you to like us. We want you to follow us. We're on Facebook. We're on Instagram. We're everywhere.
We're also, if you don't have time or you're working or you're driving and you can't watch a podcast, we're on Acast, we're on Spotify, we're on Amazon,
Apple.
We're on Apple, and other
Anywhere you basically
smaller
get your
podcast areas. We're there.
Yeah.
And I think we've got a fun podcast coming up for y'all.
We're going to try something new.
Yeah, we are. And it kind of ties in with the Camino Real.
And it ties in with us.
Yeah.
That's all that matters.
Yeah, it definitely ties in with us. You shouldn't be surprised when you find that out.
But yeah, so we've got some new type of episodes coming up. And but until then, we're just going to keep learning about the world around us and sharing it with you, and hope you follow along.
Yep, most definitely.
All right. Well, I guess that's about it, Monica.
I don't have anything else.
You have me.
I have you, and you did a stellar job.
Fine job we did, team. All right, well, until next time, be sure to go hike your own hike, and we'll catch you next time.
Bye, guys.
Bye.